Hi, welcome to Short Orders by RHI Solutions. You know, there's an awful lot of food in the world. Many of you listening are probably involved in some way with the processing and creation of the over 300 million tons of food consumed annually in the United States. There's also an awful lot of food wasted, like an awful lot. But what exactly is food waste? There are two primary types. The first being food loss, which refers to the food that we lose at the early stages of its production cycle, i.e. before it's in a finished consumable form. And the second being food wastage, which refers to the food that is perfectly fit for consumption, but gets discarded for any number of different reasons. For today's exercise, we're going to take on both birds with one stone.
At what point was there an abundance of birds and shortage of stones? No, just use one. We're trying to conserve rocks.
Now, the causes of food waste are numerous and occur throughout the food system, during production, processing, distribution, retail and food service sales, and consumption. Inefficiencies can take place during every stage of what can easily be described as a fairly bloated pipeline. So, as we've already alluded to, what on the outside appears to be a single issue is actually a densely intertwined layer cake of doom. A 2021 survey by the United Nations Environment Program estimated that global food waste was 931 million tons per year. Now that's across three separate sectors, 61% of which was private households. Another 13% came from retail, and today we're going to be taking a closer look at the remaining 26%, which comes from the food service industry. So what's the harm? Doesn't food just biodegrade? Well, sure, when discarded in relatively small quantities and under normal circumstances. But here's the deal. Landfills aren't normal circumstances, as organic material can't easily break down in a landfill because they're designed for storage, not decomposition. Waste is highly compacted and then piled densely on top of other waste, creating a system without much natural oxygenation, and that impedes the work of decomposers like worms and fungus. I won't go deep into the science of this, but know that when food is disposed of in landfills, it decomposes anaerobically, i.e. without oxygen, producing methane, a potent greenhouse gas that is about 25 times more effective at trapping heat in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. Landfills are to blame for about 15% of all methane emissions in the United States. According to the EPA, that's the equivalent to the greenhouse gas emissions from 21.6 million passenger vehicles driven per year. Beyond that, approximately 1/4 of all the fresh water used globally goes into producing food that is ultimately never consumed. Crops like rice and wheat require vast amounts of water for cultivation. For example, it takes about 1,800 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of rice. If that rice is wasted, all the associated water resources are wasted as well. Then consider the energy required to power tractors, run processing plants, and transport food over long distances. When food is discarded, all the energy used in these processes become wasted, further straining the environment. I think you're starting to see the picture painted here. I suppose the good news, though, is that many individual restaurants and even food processors have invested millions of dollars into reducing their impact on this issue. Money that private households don't have, which is why we see the massive disparity between the two. However, 26% of 931 million tons is still, and let me do the math here real quick, still a lot of food waste. As we mentioned previously, food waste takes place at every step of the production and distribution pipeline. So let's track a fairly average steakhouse meal backward from table to farm and see just how much is lost along the way.
Looking backwards from the doctor to the drugs, from the packing to the taxi to the cabbie to the club.
Okay, your order arrives. A ribeye, medium rare, beside a large bed of garlic mashed potatoes, sidled near a healthy portion of roasted asparagus with a peppercorn mushroom sauce. Your total meal comes out to roughly 20 ounces. Once satiated, your waiter comes by to collect your dishes, finding about an ounce each of steak and asparagus along with some stray potatoes, mushroom slices, and sauce. These leftovers get scraped into the trash on the way to the dish pit. For those scoring from home, that comes out to a little over 2 ounces wasted, or 15% of your entire meal. Stepping back, let's see what happened just before your meal was served. Now, of course, thanks to products like Carlisle's Store Plus Permalabel pans and high-efficiency Thermalright walk-ins, restaurants are able to more effectively eliminate food waste than can be done in a home kitchen, But with that being said, environmental nonprofit Green Blue has found that up to half a pound of food waste is created per every meal served in a commercial setting. Taking that into account, what was a 20-ounce meal has now turned into 28, 10 ounces of which have ended up in the trash. That in and of itself may be surprising, but hey, at least the food made it all the way to the kitchen. Annually, 3 billion pounds get tossed prior to making it that far, as we're now reaching an extremely critical phase in the pipeline. Transporting perishables on both a local and global scale can leave enormous quantities of food at risk of becoming lost or wasted. During food transportation and distribution, perishable foods are at their most vulnerable to food waste, as most fruit and vegetable products need to reach restaurants within 48 hours in order to remain at peak conditions and freshness. Otherwise, entire shipments may be rejected by the buyer.
No, sir, I don't like it.
This means that any unforeseen disturbances or major delays during transportation can result in an entire shipment of food simply being thrown away. The rejection of perishable food shipments, which are thrown out if another buyer can't be found quickly, is a large problem. It's estimated that between 2 and 5% of food shipments are rejected by food buyers. Now, rejected food shipments can often be donated to food rescue organizations, but just as often, the quantities are too large for them to even accept. So far, for our meal, that comes out to another 3.5 ounces of waste. We're now at 13 ounces of food that will never be consumed, simply for one meal served. And we'll get to the grim final totals here shortly, as we're getting closer and closer to the farm. We're just not quite there yet. Right now, though, we're in the processing plant. Here in the plant, processing of raw agricultural products are turned into packaged and shippable goods. During this stage, we accrue losses from trimming, peeling, and other preparatory steps. Additionally, products that don't meet strict cosmetic standards may be discarded as well. Numbers for processing loss can be a little hard to pin down, as dairy, meat, produce, packaged foods, processed foods, and other categories all differ drastically in their production methods. But on average, we're looking at about 13% of the raw food products that come into processing facilities get wasted. So taking that number, we can go ahead and toss another 2.5 ounces from our meal. Things are adding up quick. Luckily, we've reached the end of the road. Moving backwards to our final, or first step, depending on how you look at this exercise, we've reached the farm. And this is where it gets stickier yet, as the reasons for waste and loss, again, aren't so straightforward here. At this stage, several reasons edible crops won't make it to the market include environmental factors, politics, economics, and more. In some cases, market prices for certain crops may be too low to even justify the cost of harvesting them. In other cases, bans on or political sentiment against migrant labor may lead to farms being unable to find a workforce willing to harvest the crops, meaning they are simply left to rot. A changing climate is wreaking havoc on farms as well. Normally predictable weather patterns are giving way to excess in heat, rain, insect populations, and other factors that can ruin entire crops before they're even ready for harvest. Finally, since fruits and vegetables ripen at different times across regions, growers may struggle to find buyers for their produce towards the end of the harvest cycle, as wholesale buyers switch to other suppliers when better quality produce becomes available in other regions. Again, numbers can swing depending on what products are being farmed, ranched, or raised, but according to Earth.org and other sources, it's a fairly safe bet to say in the neighborhood of 16% of all crops and livestock go to waste before the harvest can even take place, which means our meal created another 3 ounces of wasted food. So let's take a look at our final numbers for our dinner, consisting of an 8-ounce ribeye, garlic mashed potatoes, asparagus with peppercorn mushroom sauce. For our roughly 20-ounce meal, 18 ounces of which were consumed, another 19 ounces, basically another full meal's worth of food, was thrown away or lost. While many of us, especially in the restaurant world, like to tout the benefits of farm-to-table dining, knowing where your food comes from, and practicing quote-unquote ethical food practices, the fact of the matter is the wider world still runs on a massively bloated, inefficient, waste-creating industrial system. And even if those who fully use this system want something better, rarely can they afford to live or work outside of it, as the wholesome farm-to-table ethos is well outside the realm of most people's budgets. As depressing as all of this is, I feel somewhat hopeful knowing that our industrial system could, if reformed properly, quite literally feed the entire planet. Perhaps here at Short Orders, we're a bit idealistic, but that change can start one step and one person at a time. At least we think so. But what can we do about all this? Well, for our purposes, we'll take a look at loss and waste at the final stages of the food journey. Kitchen culture and staff behavior, such as over-preparation of food, improper ingredient storage, and failure to use food scraps and trimmings are major contributors to food loss. So, reuse jumps off the page right away. Things like meat scraps and unattractive vegetables can be used in soups, stews, and other large batch dishes, where the cosmetic imperfections or perfect cuts of meat don't really make that much of a difference. Vulcan tilt skillets and kettles are often used to create dishes out of these ingredients. Portion sizes as well have become an issue, so simply scaling back portion sizes, even slightly, will save literally millions of pounds of food waste per year. Another great way to save food is by storing and preparing it correctly. That's again where products like Carlisle's Permalabel pans and energy-efficient refrigeration from Charleston and Thermalright come in handy. That's probably enough for this downer episode, but if you're curious to dive a little deeper into what drives food waste, what its impacts on the environment are, and what small changes can be made, we've put several links in the description that we think will help you, including one from our friends at RDT, perhaps the country's premier maker of commercial refrigeration and cooling systems. They've written and compiled a highly comprehensive look at this issue. We'll wrap it up for now, but before we go, we ask that if you enjoy the show, please like and subscribe on whatever streaming platform you use. It really does help. And also, please feel free to share this and other episodes to your social media pages. So, as always, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again real soon.